बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। हज़रत शेख रहमतुल्लाह अलैह उलमा के अलामात बयान फरमा रहे थे, तो जो फोर्थ अलामत थी वो ये था कि उलमा खाने और पीने के और लिबास की मुदगियों बेहतरियों की तरफ मुतवज्जे न हो। इसकी तशरीह में हज़रत शेख रहमतुल्लाह अलैह फरमाते हैं कि यहया बिन यज़ीद नौफली रहमतुल्लाह अलैह ने हज़रत इमाम मालिक रहमतुल्लाह अलैह को एक ख़त लिखा। यहया बिन यज़ीद नौफली रहमतुल्लाह अलैह wrote इमाम मालिक a letter जिसमें हम दो सलात के बाद लिखा कि मुझे ये ख़बर पहुँची है कि आप बारीक कपड़े पहनते हैं। In which he wrote after praising Allah Almighty, sending durood upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I have come to learn that you like to wear fine clothes और पतली रोटी इस्तेमाल करते हैं, and you also eat and consume very thin chapatis और नरम बिस्तर पर आराम फरमाते हैं, and that you sleep on a very soft bed। दरबान भी आपने मुकर्रर कर रखा है, you also got a butler। हालांकि आपने ऊंचे उलमा में हैं, आप ऊंचे उलमा में हैं, even though you're from the high status उलमा। दूर दूर से लोग सफ़र करके पास इल्म सीखने के लिए आते हैं, and people travel to you from far away, from great distances। आम इमाम है, मुक्तदा है, you're an imam, you're someone that's followed। लोग आपका इत्तिबा करते हैं, the people follow you। आपको बहुत एहतियात करनी चाहिए, you should be very careful। महज मुखलिसाना ये ख़त लिख रहा हूँ, I'm only writing this letter out of sincerity for you। अल्लाह के सिवा किसी दूसरे को इस ख़त की खबर नहीं। There is nobody aside from Allah Almighty who knows about this। फ़क़त वस्सलाम। Yani Hazrat Shaykh Rahmatullah Alayhi here mentions an example of the ulama of the past and how they used to advise each other, but also used to advise that in their libas, in their clothing, in their eating, in the way they lived, they should adopt a simple means। As Imam Malik Rahmatullah Alayhi ने इसका जवाब तहरीर फरमाया। Imam Malik Rahmatullah Alayhi he responded saying कि तुम्हारा खत पहुंचा, that your letter was received, जो मेरे लिए नसीहत नामा शफ़क़त और नामा और तंबीह थी, within which there was advice and there's also compassion and there's also some sort of admonishment। Allah Ta'ala शान और तक़वा के साथ तुम्हें मुंतफ़े फरमाए। May Allah Almighty give you benefit with taqwa और इस नसीहत की जज़ाए खैर अता फरमाए, and He also should, may Allah Almighty give you the best of rewards for this advice। और मुझे अल्लाह ताला शान और अमल की तौफ़ीक अता फरमाए। May Allah Almighty grant me the tawfiq to do act upon this। खूबियों पर अमल और बुराइयों से बचना अल्लाह ताला ही की तौफीक से हो सकता है। He then says, Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi then says that acting upon the pious actions and to be safeguarded from the impious actions, sins, etc., is only through the tawfiq and the accordance and the tawfiq of Allah Almighty। जो उमूर तुमने जिक्र किए ये सही है, ऐसा ही होता है। In all of those things that you have mentioned, this is correct, it is as this is। अल्लाह ताला मुझे माफ़ फरमाए, may Allah Almighty forgive me। लेकिन ये सब चीज़ें जायज़ है। However, he says that all of these things are permissible। अल्लाह ताला का इरशाद है, Allah Almighty says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ إِلَى آخِرِ الآية। And he say, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that whoever makes haram the nice things that Allah Almighty has created from clothes, etc., जिनको उसने अपने बंदों के वास्ते पैदा किया, that which has been created for the slaves of Allah Almighty, और खाने पीने की हलाल चीज़ों को किसने हराम किया, and who has made haram those things from eating and drinking। इसके बाद तहरीर फरमाया, after this Imam Malik रहमतुल्लाह wrote कि मैं खूब जानता हूँ कि उन उम्र का इख्तियार न करना इख्तियार करने से औला और बेहतर है। He then says that I know very well that not adopting these things is better than adopting these things। आइंदा भी अपने गिरामी नामों से मुझे मुशर्रफ करते रहे, मैं भी खत लिखता रहूँगा। And he says that in the future keep writing to me and inshallah I shall respond to you as well। फ़क़त वस्सलाम वस्सलाम। कितनी लतीफ़ बात इमाम हज़रत शेख रहमतुल्लाह ने says, कितनी लतीफ़ बात इमाम मालिक रहमतुल्लाह ने इख्तियार फरमाई। Very subtle point that इमाम मालिक रहमतुल्लाह has adopted, कि जवाज़ का फतवा भी तहरीर फरमा दिया, that he has given the fatwa of permissibility और उसका इकरार भी कर लिया, and at the same time he also admitted कि वक़ई ज़्यादा बेहतर उमूर का तर्क ही था, that at the same time not adopting those things is better। And from this, the one point is that the Mashaykh say that a person should adopt simplicity in their lives, but at the same time something else that's even greater here, which is the way that Yahya bin Yazid Nawfali rahmatullah alayhi, he writes to Imam Malik, who's the Imam of one of the 4 accepted Imams. Imam Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of the place of Hijrah, yani the Madinatul Munawwara. The Imam Malik, who's got thousands of students, his books even today, Muwatta Imam Malik, and all the different books are read. And he's writing to him, giving him some advice on something very subtle, that's very permissible. Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, being a great alim and a great scholar, he doesn't turn around and condemn the other person for giving him advice. But he turns around and he accepts his advice, and very subtly, with ishara, he mentions that these things are permissible, but at the same time, it's better to avoid them. Please do keep writing to me. And this is the way that the mashayikh and the ulama did ikhtilaf with each other, or they had a different view on points, but they wouldn't, go gun-ho or shoot from the hip, as they say, but rather they do things in a very subtle, with decorum, with respect. And something that's very, as the Sheikh says, kitni latif baat, very subtle thing that Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi mentions, that he gives the fatwa of jawaz. At the same time, he also admits that these things shouldn't be adopted. And then the other thing, from the ishara and nas of the text, we understand that we should adopt some sort of subtle means when we discuss issues with each other. We shouldn't shoot from the hip. The five alamat of the mashayikh of the ulama is, Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi mentions कि पांचवी alamat ulama akhirat की ये है, that the 5th alamat or the sign of the ulama of the akhirat is कि salatin और hukam से दूर रहे, that they stay and avoid the kings and the sultans and hukam and the rulers. बिला ज़रूरत के उनके साथ हरगिज़ न जाए, without any need they don't go to them, बल्कि वो खुद भी आए तो मुलाकात कम रखे. And even if they were to come, then they would keep the visit very brief. इसलिए कि उनके साथ मेल जोल उनको खुशनुदी और रिज़ाजुई में तकल्लुफ़ बरतने से खाली न होगा. Why? Because meeting them and mixing with them they'd be forced to make them happy, and at the same time, there will be some sort of takalluf, yani affectatious behavior, in that they try and do something in order to make them a bit pleased, a bit happy. And because of that, then what happens is they might start mudahanat in deen, that start bending a little bit when it comes to religion. वो लोग अक्सर जालिम और नाजायज़ उमूर का इर्तिकाब करने वाले होते हैं. He says that the people of government generally, in those times, maybe in this time as well, अक्सर जालिम और नाजायज़ उमूर का इर्तिकाब करने वाले होते हैं, that they generally do oppression, or they do things that are impermissible, जिस पर इनकार करना ज़रूरी है, for which it's necessary for them to object. उनके जुल्म का इजहार, उनके नाजायज़ फ़ैल पर तंबीह करना ज़रूरी है. At the same time, to express their oppression and to tell them and warn them of what is impermissible is also necessary on the ulama. और उस पर सुकूत दीन में मुदाहनत है, and to remain quiet on those issues is mudahanat in deen. Yani it's giving away bits of deen. You're not actually acting upon it. That's what mudahanat means. अगर उनकी खुशनुदी के लिए उनकी तारीफ करना पड़े तो ये सही झूठ है. If in order to make them happy they have to do their तारीफ, they have to praise them, then this becomes explicit lie. और उनके माल की तरफ अगर तबीयत को मैलान हुआ और तमा हुई तो नाजायज़ हुए. And if they're inclined towards their wealth in order to gain something from them, a few pence, a few dinars, a few dirhams, then that's impermissible. बहरहाल इनका इख्तिलात बहुत से मफासिद की कुंजी है. He says that ultimately mixing with the rulers is the key to a number of mafasid, a number of negative points. Huzur sallallahu alaihi wasallam irshad hai, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says कि जो शख्स जंगल में रहता है, that the person who lives in a jungle, he lives in the wilderness, वो सख्त मिजाज हो जाता है, his temperament becomes very harsh. और जो शिकार के पीछे लग जाता है, the person who goes out hunting and he's finding the hunt or the prey, वो सब चीज़ से गाफिल हो जाता है, then he becomes heedless of everything. और जो बादशाह के पास आमद और रफ्त शुरू कर दे, वो फितना में पड़ जाता है. And the person who comes and goes to the king and the rulers, then sooner or later he falls into some sort of fitna. हज़रत हुज़ैफ़ा रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु फरमाते हैं कि अपने आप को फितनों की जगह खड़े होने से बचाओ. हज़रत हुज़ैफ़ा रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु says कि अपने आप को फितनों की जगह खड़े होने से बचाओ. Save yourselves from standing at the place where there is fitna. किसी ने पूछा कि फितनों की जगह कौन सी है. Somebody asked, what is the place of fitna? फरमाया उमरा के दरवाजे, the doors of the princes, कि उनके पास जाकर उनकी गलत कहानियों की तस्दीक करनी पड़ती है. Why? Because when you go there, then you have to say that the wrong things that they're doing is correct. और उनकी तारीफ़ में ऐसी बातें कहनी पड़ती है, and in order to praise them you have to say such things जो उनमें नहीं है, which isn't absolutely true. उस वक्त सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का इरशाद है, it says regarding नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम says कि बदतरीन उलमा वो है, that the worst of the ulama are those जो हुक्काम के यहाँ हाज़री दे, that go and visit the rulers, और बेहतरीन हाकिम वो है, and the best of hakims and the rulers are those जो उलमा के यहाँ हाजिर हो, who present themselves to the ulama. हज़रत सिमनून रज़ियल्लाहु रहमतुल्लाह अलैह जो हज़रत सिर्री अस्सक़ती रहमतुल्लाह अलैह के असहाब में है, it says regarding Samnoon rahmatullah alayhi, who was the companions of the very great Egyptian Sufi Sirri as-Saqati, कि मैंने ये सुना था, I heard, कि जब तुम किसी आलिम को ये सुनो कि वो दुनिया की मोहब्बत रखता है, that when you hear about an alim that he loves the dunya, तो उस शख्स को अपने दीन के बारे में मुत्तहम समझो, then consider him to be at fault in his religion. मैंने उसका खुद तजुर्बा किया. He says that I experienced this. जब भी मैं बादशाह के यहाँ गया, whenever I went to the king, तो वापसी पर मैंने अपने दिल को तोला, then he checked and gauged his heart, तो उस पर मैंने एक वबाल पाया, then I found a calamity on it. हालांकि तुम देखते हो, whereas you can see कि मैं वहाँ सख्त गुफ्तगू करता हूँ, I speak very harshly to the king, उनकी राय का सख्ती से खिलाफ करता हूँ, I severely oppose his opinion on issues. वहाँ किसी चीज़ से मुंतफ़े नहीं होता. I don't take any benefit for anything that's with him. हत्ता कि वहाँ का पानी भी नहीं पीता. To such an extent that I don't even drink the water there. हमारे उलमा बनु इसराइल के उलमा से भी बुरे हैं. Our ulama are worse than the ulama and the rabbis of the children of Israel. कि वो हुक्काम के पास जाकर उनकी गुंजाइश बताते हैं. That they go to the हुक्काम, they go to the rulers, and then they give them stratagems in order to get out of issues of fiqh and how to make gunjaish and uneasiness in religion. उनकी खुशनूदी की फ़िक्र करते हैं. They're more worried about making them happy. अगर वो उनसे उनकी ज़िम्मेदारियाँ साफ साफ बताए, if they were to tell them their responsibilities very clearly, तो वो लोग उनका जाना भी गिरा समझने लगे, then they would also find it difficult for them to come to them. और यह साफ साफ कहना उन उलमा के लिए अल्लाह ताला शान की यहाँ नजात का सबब बन जाए. And for the ulama to say something very clearly to the rulers, then it becomes a means for them to gain salvation in the hereafter. उलमा का सलातीन के यहाँ जाना एक बहुत बड़ा फितना है. For the ulama to go to the rulers is a great fitna. और शैतान के इगवा करने का ज़रिया है. It's a means of driving astray, शैतान driving them astray. बिलखुसूस जिसको बोलना अच्छा आता हो, उसको शैतान ये समझाता है. And this is especially the case for the person who is able to speak very well. The Satan explains to him कि तेरे जाने से उनकी इस्लाह होगी. By you going there, you're going to do their islah, you're going to rectify them. वो उसकी वजह से जुल्म से बचेंगे. Because of this, they will safeguard themselves from giving zulm to other people. और दीन के शायर की हिफाजत होगी. And you'll be able to protect the salient features of religion, the sha'air. हत्ता कि आदमी ये समझने लगता है, to such an extent that a person thinks कि उनके पास जाना भी कोई दीनी चीज़ है. To go to the हुक्काम is also something of religion. हालांकि उनके पास जाने से उनकी दिलदारी में मुदाहनत की बातें करना, whereas the fact is to go to them, then you have to say something in order to make them happy, और उनकी बेजा तारीफ़ी करना पड़ती है, and you have to praise them willy nilly, जिसमें दीन की हलाकत कर है, in which there is destruction to religion. Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah ne Hazrat Basri rahmatullah ko likha. Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who was one of the Umayyad Khalifs or rulers, he wrote to Hazrat Hassan Basri rahmatullah alayh कि मुझे ऐसे मुनासिब लोगों का पता बताओ. Show me those such people that are suitable, जिनसे मैं अपनी इस खिलाफत के काम में मदद दूँ, from whom I can take assistance in the issue that I have before me, which is the running of the state. Hazrat Hassan rahmatullah ने जवाब में लिखा, Hazrat Hassan rahmatullah alayh Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala rahmatullah alayh, he wrote in response कि अहले दीन तो तुम तक ना आएंगे, that the people of religion will not go to you, और दुनियादारों को तुम इख्तियार न करोगे, and the people of dunya you will not adopt, और ना करना चाहिए, you shouldn't do this. यानी हरीस तमा लोगों को कि वो अपने लालच में काम खराब कर देंगे, that they will destroy things by being दुनियादार. इसलिए शरीफ नसब लोगों से काम लो. And because of this, because the ulama won't go to you, and the dunyadar you shouldn't adopt those people to be close to you who are of noble lineage. इसलिए कि उनकी कौमी शराफत उनको उस बात से रोकेगी. Why? Because their nobility shall stop them from कि वो अपनी नस्बी शराफत को खियानत से गंदा करें. That they do something that's wrong. ये जवाब हज़रत उमर बिन अब्दुल अजीज़ रहमतुल्लाह अलैह को लिखा. He wrote this response to Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz, जिनका zuhud और taqwa, adl और इंसाफ दरबुल मसल है, who was renowned for his zuhud and his asceticism, taqwa and his justice and his fairness. हत्ता कि वो उमर सानी कहलाते हैं, to such an extent that he was known as Umar the second. ये इमाम गज़ाली रहमतुल्लाह अलैह का इशार है. लेकिन इस नाकारा के ख्याल में अगर कोई दीनी मजबूरी हो, so Hazrat Shaykh rahmatullah alayhi, and that's why Imam Ihya Ulumuddin, Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi's book, you should read it, it's fine, but you should read it under the guidance of ulama, because certain points there's difference of opinion within the ulama. Imam Hazrat Shaykh rahmatullah alayhi, he writes here, कि this is the view of Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi. However, is nakara ke khayal mein, it's the view of this sinner, and as Shaykh rahmatullah talks about himself, कि अगर कोई दीनी मजबूरी हो, if there is some need, a religious need, तो अपने नफ्स की हिफाजत और निगरानी करते हुए, by protecting one's nafs and by keeping a stern eye on one's nafs, जाने में मुदायका नहीं, there is no harm in going, बल्कि बसा औकात, but at times दीनी मसाले और ज़रूरत का तकादा जाना ही होता है. There is a need, a religious need to definitely go, लेकिन ये ज़रूरी है कि अपनी ज़ाती गर्ज, ज़ाती नफ़ा, माल और जा कमाना मकसूद न हो. But when the person goes, he should be very careful to make sure he has no personal objectives. There's nothing to benefit him in terms of wealth and status. बल्कि सिर्फ मुसलमानों की ज़रूरत हो, but the purpose should only be to benefit the Muslims. Allah Ta'ala Shanu ने फरमाया, Allah Almighty says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْمُفْسِدَ مِنَ الْمُصْلِحِ, that Allah Almighty, Allah Ta'ala मस्तर के ज़ाय करने वाले को और मस्तर की रियायत करने वाले को अलग अलग जानते हैं. That Allah Almighty, He knows the ones that spread corruption from those that spread goodness. You know, one of the stories mentions that Hazrat Moulana Fazlur Rahman Ganj Muradabadi Rahmatullah alayh, who was a very great hadith scholar, and he mentions about him that during the British time, one of the district collectors wanted to come and visit him. So he fixed the time, and Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi, he forgot, and all of a sudden this person, the district collector was a British person, he from the East India Company, he arrived in Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi's khanqa. So Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi, he paid no attention to this person, he kept him waiting at the door. Not because he was arrogant or anything like that, but he had no ahmiyat of this person. And then this district collector, he wanted to come to take some tabarruk from Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi. He brought his, what Hazrat inside the book writes, his memsab, and the madam came with him as well. You know, she can imagine dressed in a frock and everything. So Hazrat Thanvi Rahmatullah alayhi writes this, that when they then were allowed to come inside in his khanqa, Hazrat Rahmatullah, Hazrat Moulana Fazlur Rahman sitting there, they couldn't sit on the floor because he's wearing trousers, suit, etc. He couldn't sit on the floor. So Hazrat Moulana Fazlur Rahman Ganj Muradabadi said, you know, I think there's a chair somewhere in the back, a broken chair, bring the chair, but just hold it still. So let the man sit down. So he sat down. But then he says in the book कि मेम साहब के लिए भी कुछ करना पड़ता है ना, मेम साहब is on equal footing, yeah. तो हज़रत रहमतुल्लाह अलैह then says चलो उसके लिए एक बाल्टी है, चलो तो so he got a bucket and they turned the bucket round and then she had to sit on the bucket. So you can imagine this lady in 18th century, 19th century British clothes, long dress with a umbrella probably and everything else, all the frilly dress. So she then sits down and they sat a little while and then they asked for his dua and then they left. So this was the way that the Mashaykh and the Akabir actually dealt with these issues. Sometimes there is sometimes a need for ulama to enter the public sphere, although it's a very dangerous space as well at the same time. If some ulama do, then there is a precedent for this. We see this in our Mashaykh, our Kabir, Hazrat Madin Rahmatullah alayh, and what he did. But at the same time, it's also a path full of trials and tribulations and difficulties. And the easier path is, as the hadith mentions, to sit quietly in a corner. But sometimes if there's a dini need, then that does need to take place. And if ulama do go down that path, then again, as like we mentioned last week, remember there's always 3 fingers pointing towards yourself rather than one to the other. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. So, inshallah, about 5 times Qul Huwallahu Ahad and Isal Sawab to the Mashaykh of the Silsila. Then, inshallah, we'll begin the zikr. 1 tasbih la ilaha illallah, 1 tasbih illallah, and 2 tasbihs of Allah, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, lam yalid. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الله 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 لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفينا وسندنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك على الدرجات وتبلغنا بأقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وأتباعه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا جزاك الله